Good afternoon, folks. This is the Madcap speaking on another special Madcap video where I'm here to subvert your expectations by calling out Hollywood's bullshit, mainly Disney, and the woke culture spear that we're definitely stuck under. But here's an article from our lovely friends of ScreenRant.com where 4 days ago we got this article from the site detailing more things about no surprises there, The Last Jedi. And the headline article reads why Rey herself really scared Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. So if you guys already have seen The Last Jedi, you know, like the big trailer moment before the film had come out was just Force Awakens established Rey's power being overly powerful, to the point where in training her power does reach a unyielding plateau where it starts to frighten Luke Skywalker. And in context with what the film shows, is pretty much just Luke Skywalker just kind of pretty much just reliving his fear with what happened with Ben Solo or Kylo Ren from what happened during the Jedi Academy. And well, really what happened behind the scenes, well, I mean, that's already a big controversial point. So anyways, so this article tries to give context to why Luke Skywalker was scared of training Rey, or reluctant to train Rey. Well, he really, when he offered to train Rey, he didn't really give much, just a begrudging set of lessons, where he promised 3 lessons, but turned out he just gave like 2 in the actual film. So this article is pretty much just another way to just pretty much just kind of answer on some of the plot holes of pretty much just out of what the sequel trilogy had left open in terms of its lazy, nonsensical writing from The Force Awakens to The Rise of Skywalker. I mean, you had J.J. Abrams on board with the first and third film of that trilogy, and then you had Rian Johnson just helming full creative control. So, to start this off, we're going to read this down. So, Star Wars has revealed the real reason Rey scared Luke Skywalker. When Rey arrived on the planet Acto, she was surprised to find Luke Skywalker an unwilling teacher. I wouldn't say an unwilling teacher. I would just say that she was there to pass on the message that the Resistance needed Luke Skywalker. So Rey wasn't really there to be taught about anything on the Force. She was mainly there just to recruit Luke Skywalker back into the cause, because Leia and the Resistance need Luke Skywalker. And just being pretty much just speechless seeing Luke Skywalker's reaction when she handed him the saber, and his everyday activities including drinking green seal milk. The aged Jedi Master has given up on the Force, blaming himself for Ben Solo's fall to the dark side. Luke eventually relented, but he was clearly wary of repeating his past mistakes. In one key scene, yes, the trailer moment, Luke watched with fear as Rey dove straight into the dark side of the Force. I've seen this raw strength only once before. It didn't scare me enough then. As it did with Ben Solo, it does now. Luke became increasingly aware of some sort of Force bond between Rey and Kylo Ren, and he found that deeply disturbing. Oh yes, the moment where Luke enters Rey's tent, and it pretty much just comes off as Luke being in shock that his student, a young girl, is having some contact with a boy, and so it's pretty much just like, you know, it's pretty much like the equivalent of like your uncle just seeing his niece, or I don't know, just like some camp counselor wandering into the tent and see like a girl and a boy making out. That's what it comes across. And And next, it goes down into this paragraph relating to some in-universe tie-in book that tries to answer some of these questions. Now, here's my biggest issue here. Now, the movies themselves shouldn't be a product of ancillary media to satisfy fans with lingering questions. I am not a fan of just tie-in media that you have to consume in order to get the full grasp of the story in the actual films. I think the books should be a product of the movie, and the movie should be its own story with its own subplots or mysteries and ambiguities or any plot thread that should be wrapped up and paid off in some way. But the thing is with the sequel trilogy is that a lot of these things are open ended and they end up breaking their own rules within the context of Star Wars. So it just comes across as pretty much just Rian Johnson and J.J. Abrams just raising a lot of questions in their own movies, and any answers we got are just like they raise even bigger questions about how we think about Star Wars and in the context of like the sequel trilogy. So, okay, just to go down further, Lucasfilm has recently published a in-universe book called Secrets of the Jedi. Secrets of the Jedi is just an encyclopedia book that was released a month before The Rise of Skywalker had come out. Supposedly compiled from Luke Skywalker's notes shortly before his death. Okay. In one section, he discusses the idea of Force bond, explaining the Force can be used to mystically connect it to two people. Now, hold on a sec. So, in context of Secrets of the Jedi, it's supposed to contain some notes from Luke Skywalker that he had in his possession before his death, which was never hinted or implied in The Last Jedi. It is established in The Last Jedi that Luke did cut himself off from the Force from any knowledge or wisdom of the Force that has been passed on to the Jedi. And, okay, continue further on. In one section, he discusses the idea of Force bonds, explaining the Force can be used to mystically connect two people. Now, here's another thing. We never know if Luke suspected that Rey was in contact with Kylo Ren this whole time, at least until that Force connection encounter in the tent, or in that hut or whatever. Did he start to notice the signs and then demands Rey to leave the island? So it was never suspected that Luke knew about this whole Force bond because he had cut himself in the Force, and the only times that he was susceptible and opened himself up into the Force was through that little fountain, that little pond, with the with the Force emblem, where he tries to connect with Leia, and Luke realizes she's comatose. So it is the first attempts of Luke trying to reconnect to the Force and noticing that Leia is at a worse cause than she's ever at before. Okay, to continue through this section, though this may seem like a harmless and perhaps even valuable ability, Luke writes, is easily manipulated by those on the dark side. Some powerful Force users have been able to create secret bonds with others who are unaware of their connection. Then they use these bonds to corrupt their target and steer their actions. Let me reread this. Some powerful Force users have been able to create secret bonds with others who are unaware of their connection. Then they use these bonds to corrupt their target and steer their actions. Even if the unwanted bond is detected, it can still be extremely difficult to break. Let's see. Now the thing is, with in context with the Last Jedi, we understand that Supreme Leader Snoke incorporated this connected force bond between Rey and Kylo as a way to manipulate Rey into thinking that she could redeem Kylo Ren into the light side based on her interactions with him through this force bond. So that was established in the Last Jedi. So it's let's see here. Easily manipulated by those on the dark side, some powerful force users. Now, I'm not very sure if it's entailing on Snoke or the fact that a powerful force, like force sensitive Jedi like Rey, could pull off a secret bond with somebody else. But this is just pointless exposition to fill in the blanks, even though we were pretty much just explain about this whole force bond situation in The Last Jedi. The text is accompanied by an image of Rey and Kylo Ren, making it clear whom Luke was thinking about when he wrote these words. Luke could be forgiven for believing history was repeating itself. Palpatine used a force bond to corrupt Ben Solo, one he may well have created before Ben was even born. Now, this opens another can of worms, because in The Force Awakens and in Last Jedi, the exposition from Han Solo and Luke Skywalker reinforced the backstory where Snoke, not Palpatine, but Snoke, was responsible for corrupting Ben Solo to join the dark side, even though in the flashbacks presented in The Last Jedi, there was never no presence or indication that Snoke was manipulating Ben Solo. It was just spoken dialogue. It's just like blanket exposition and repeating exposition from The Force Awakens. The Emperor had watched Ben from afar, subtly manipulating him, even able to whisper in Ben's ear when he stood next to Luke Skywalker himself. Okay. The Emperor had watched Ben from afar, which is undoubtedly the dumbest thing I've ever read. We know that Snoke was trying to manipulate Ben, but then as we come to understand in The Rise of Skywalker, Snoke was, I'm assuming, a successful clone or just a deformed clone, because he was one of many failed clones in what you call it, the fucking Sith planet, Exegol. In the Exegol labs, Snoke was it's never clear if he was the first successful clone or just a clone with some physical deformities, because there were other Snoke clones that had failed in the cloning process. Luke was unaware of Palpatine's survival, of course, but no doubt he had spent his years in exile looking back and deducing Snoke had created just that kind of secret bond. Thus, when Luke looked at Rey and recognized a connection to Kylo Ren, he would have assumed his former apprentice was trying the same trick. Now, okay, Luke never deduced Snoke's part in the whole Force bond. In fact, it was just revealed to us as Rey was captured by Kylo Ren in the First Order when she took the pod into Snoke's flagship. So what I understand is pretty much, yeah, Luke was unaware of Palpatine's survival. In fact, nobody was aware of Palpatine's survival throughout the trilogy, because there was no planning in the trilogy. There was no hint or indication that Palpatine was still alive, even though he was tossed into a fucking chute in Return of the Jedi by Darth Vader. So again, this is just bizarre explanations to, these hanging plot threads in The Last Jedi. Of course, in reality, Rey and Kylo Ren were not merely bonded. There were a dyad in the Force. A dyad. Let me see what a dyad refers to. Now you may excuse me because I don't know my terminologies all too well. Dyad, deity, all the fucking same. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Just group of two people, of course. Rey and Kylo Ren were not merely bonded, they were a dyad in the Force. Yeah, in reality, yeah, that was pretty much the thing that was further explored the Rise of Skywalker, which, in terms of the whole Force bond thing, as like an idea, it's not a bad idea as like a Force concept. In fact, it's one of the more, it's perhaps the only fresher idea contributed into Star Wars. And so, yeah, well, in The Last Jedi, Snoke manipulated Kylo Ren and Rey to have this Force bond. There was still a lingering connection by the end of The Last Jedi. And so that was then further explored in The Rise of Skywalker, where you have these surrealist, where you have these surreal sequences where Kylo and Rey are still connecting with each other across these different places where each character is held at. That's an idea that's I would say it's acceptable in terms of like this trilogy. This concept was barely explained in The Rise of Skywalker, but subsequent Star Wars tie-ins have confirmed it is a natural phenomenon created by the will of the Force that can be cultivated. The Force dyad has not been seen for millennia because it appears to it appears to require both the light and the dark sides of the Force. As a result, neither Luke nor Palpatine had any idea what they were dealing with. Of course, because that's especially on Palpatine's side during that whole final climax, which is kind of odd considering that the whole climax centers around Palpatine and Rey, and Palpatine is tempting Rey to kill him. That way, she can take his place as the Empress of the Final Order. But when in fact, towards the end of that battle, Rey takes her saber and even Ben's saber and deflects Palpatine's lightning, thus killing him, which would have made her the Empress, but still an act of violence being committed against the Emperor. So the whole Force dyad, which has not been seen in millennia, it just comes off like, the problem with the sequel trilogy and even the prequels is that they try to go out of the way to portray the Force as like a superpower in many aspects. So apparently, like anyone who's untrained by the Force can still be the most powerful Jedi ever. You could survive in space. You could have Force healing. You could elderly Jedi like Yoda can still master a saber, and then you would have this tie-in media that tries to answer some of these questions, but just makes the whole concept of the Force pretty convoluted and messy. So again, another article by ScreenRant. This is just moot explanations based on ancillary media, and I don't fancy ancillary media as like the source for answers. Like I said, I think for a film to stand on its own, you really have to be more careful, and you have to add a lot of attention. You have to put a lot of attention and care to what you're writing in terms of a big budget Star Wars film, because if you're Rian Johnson or J.J. Abrams, you're going to be writing a film that pretty much just makes up its own story as it goes along without really having much consideration with what we're familiar with in terms of Star Wars and of the original trilogy. And so this article is just pretty much just pointing out things from third-party media as a way to, be like, oh well, this thing was explained in the book that makes the whole trilogy make some sense. Which I do think that the trilogy should make sense on its own merit. Now I don't really follow books. I don't buy a lot of books. I don't really consume a lot of video games surrounding the sequel trilogy because the story is a disaster, and pretty much any visual or aesthetics in the sequel trilogy is very uninteresting. Which is why with the prequels, I mean, you do have a lot of media, and I was one of those people that did I did grow up with a lot of things I was exposed to, mostly because I was able to get access to them in their time. But who knows? I mean, there's talk about the Clone Wars show that just wrapped up on Disney Plus. That seems to be turning a lot of people into getting back to Star Wars. But I'm not sure when I will plan to watch it. But yeah, this is just another article just to wrap this up. I think it's just all bullshit, just pointless, pointless explanations in a trilogy that, at the end of the day, makes no sense. So tell me what you guys think about this article. Like, comment, and subscribe. And I hope you guys definitely tune in to Madcap Productions, where I will continue to subvert your expectations by calling out the bullshit, especially if it's Star Wars related. Take it easy and good night.